This looks more like a vlog video in Blair Witch Project style, but this is actually something more meaningful. I promised to share my backup and storage solution some time ago, so here it is. Before I moved to my current solution, I have used internal 1TB NVMe SSD drive, but as you can imagine, the space was depleted quite fast, especially with B-roll files. Then I switched to 4TB QLC SSD for around $500, and it was a mistake because the write speed on this drive was around 100 megabytes per second for files bigger than 32 gigabytes, which means almost every video file. Of course, I've been backing up my data back then to a homemade write-based NAS solution, but it was done manually, so it was time-consuming and prone to human error. So finally, I switched to a NAS-based solution, and we are going to talk about it today. So my main storage device is QNAP NAS. It is TS-H973AX. So it is installed in my heating room in a workshop class shelf with some acrylic sheets as a kind of protection. If you can afford a dedicated rack shelf, I guess it would be a much better solution. I bought this NAS based on the recommendation of Alex Petit video. I checked all other QNAP models back then, and this one presented the best value for money for me. Maybe now there is something better, but when I checked 3 months ago, there wasn't really. At least in this price range of sub $1,200. And if you use a Mac with Thunderbolt, there are faster solutions than this one with dedicated Thunderbolt ports. This NAS is supporting UTS Hero operating system. It is ZFS based, more advanced version of QNAP QTS operating system. For main storage, I advised getting the ZFS based NAS like this one, but there is one important con. You have to buy all your drives up front, and for a normal QTS based NAS, which have X4 and Linux based RAID system, you can resize and change the RAID level of your existing RAID in the future. With ZFS like this one, it is not possible unless you are able to reconfigure your NAS from scratch when you buy additional drive, which means you lose all your data. And please remember that RAID is not a backup. It's a redundant way to store your files, but the RAID itself is not a backup. RAID-based system can be a backup system, like my backup NAS, but RAID itself is just a more robust way to store your data, not a backup. So I have two 2 terabytes SATA SSD drives each in RAID 1 as my system drive in this NAS, 2 slots on the bottom. Originally I had 1 terabyte drives, but both drives wore out. And there are 5 mechanical 18 terabytes Hitachi based, officially it's Western Digital, drives in RAID 6 config. I checked all the possible configs of RAID for 5 drives, so RAID 10 with 1 spare, RAID 6 and RAID 5, and at the end I have chosen RAID 6 because I didn't have a local advanced and automated backup solution back then. Today I will choose RAID 5. The difference is that RAID 5 still works if one of the drives dies, and RAID 6 still works if 2 drives dies. But of course you lose the capacity of these drives. RAID 5 is the fastest with this device and offer the most usable space. RAID 6 is the second fast and still offers more room than RAID 10, which is the slowest in this config with 4 drives, and results are on the screen. So 5 18 terabytes drives give me around 47 terabytes of usable space, but due to ZFS architecture, you can really use around 40 terabytes because ZFS needs around 20% free for copy on write operations. If you want to know more about ZFS, check the description below. And this NAS had 8 gigabytes of RAM originally, but I updated it to 64 gigabytes, maximum it can support, and it is ECC RAM. So I have really good protection from potential errors with both ECC and ZFS. And originally I thought I would need two U.2 SSD drives as a video editing storage. There are 2 unpopulated slots, and actually that was the recommendation from Alex Petit, but it turned out that I can easily read up to 8 streams of H.264 at the same time from the RAID 6 with mechanical disks. So I saved like $500 on these U.2 drives. I could probably read more streams from this RAID config, but my CPU and GPU are not able to decode that much data, so the real limitation here is my workstation, not the storage. And this NAS has 3 network interfaces, one 10 gigabit interface, which is my main editing connection, and it goes from this room to my office via 2 walls. So the cable goes behind this shelf, somewhere behind these boxes. Then it comes out here, goes under the door and goes, and it's terminated behind that wall back then, which is my office room. And this NAS also have 2.5 gigabit interfaces. One is serving files into my LAN and Wi-Fi, and the other one is dedicated for the local backup. And if we follow this black cable, we will actually go to the backup NAS, which is installed in my garage. Speaking of backup, I try to adhere to 3-to-1 backup rule, which means 3 copies of the data stored on 2 different types of storage or 2 different physical devices nowadays, and at least 1 copy is offsite. If you do not know this rule, check the links in the description below and get familiar with it. I'd say it's the minimum you should adhere to if you value your data. Of course, you do not need NAS to be compliant with that rule. You can have your files stored locally on your computer and pushed into 2 cloud backup providers, for example. But the most important thing is not to update every operation on your drive into the backup. So if you delete the files locally, do not mirror these operations into the backup side immediately, unless you have versioning in the cloud storage, but this is more advanced topic, so I'll stop here. Anyway, for important data, I have 1 copy on my SD/CF Express cards, then the next copy on my primary NAS, second copy on my backup NAS, this one, and offsite copy in the Backblaze. This is the cheapest cloud backup solution, yet very reliable. I can also back up some files into my co-located server, which has around 4 terabytes of storage available, but since I have a really slow internet connection, I rarely do it, but I have that option. And I mentioned a backup NAS. It is QNAP TS664, and it is at the moment populated with 2 M.2 NVMe 500 GB drives in RAID 1 as system drives. I can still use them for storing some data, and there are also 3 more budget-friendly 20 terabyte Toshibas in RAID 5 config. So I have around 34 terabytes of usable space on the mechanical RAID 5. And I still have 3 unpopulated 3.5 inch base, so I can grow that RAID by additional 50 terabytes, making it around 84 terabytes. And this NAS is more of a budget solution. Came with 8 gigabytes of RAM, but since I have the RAM from my other NAS laying around, I extended it to maximum. This supports is 16 gigabytes. And actually, this NAS could be somebody's main NAS. It has two 2.5 gigabits Ethernet connections, which is plenty if you edit like 4 video streams at once. And actually, it should be able to support, in theory, 10 streams of Sony's 10-bit 422 at 24 or 25 FPS. Performance problems will start with this NAS. If you edit 8K or RAW files, then 10 gigabit link is recommended or something faster. There are 40 gigabits and Thunderbolt models of QNAP NASs, but they are more expensive. And for me, my main NAS still has some overhead. So, for example, I was able to easily read 3 B-RAW files from it before my CPU was not able to play more of them. So actually there was still bandwidth to read the files, but my computer was too lame to play it. And both my NASs are connected to the smart UPS. So if there is a power outage, they still work for around 1 hour. And my workstation also has an UPS, so I can easily work for the next 30 minutes and safely write all my projects into that storage. And for backups, I use Hybrid Backup Sync, HBS. This is QNAP native software. I have already restored some files from this backup, which I overwritten by mistake, and it was really straightforward and fast. And I back up all my photos, around 1 terabyte at the moment, to Backblaze and to my local backup NAS, so 3-to-1 rule is met. For the videos, it depends how important they are. Important ones are going into the same scheme, so Backblaze and local backup NAS, less important, only local backup. And my backup also has a UPS which claims 97 minutes runtime, and current location of this NAS is temporary. I will probably move it first to my workshop in the backyard, and now the backup is taking place. So some files are backup every hour, some files are backup every 15 minutes. It depends on the policy I applied to the backup. So actually the worst RPO I have is 1 hour. So I will probably move it first to my workshop in the backyard, but I have to buy a dedicated rack shelf and make an Ethernet connection to the other building, so I'm actually waiting for better weather to do it. And if I have a fiber connection in the future, actually the fiber is 20 meters from my home, but Poland is a weird country and 5 ESPs operating in the area are not willing to connect my home. But when I get the fiber, I would probably move this NAS to my friend's home, so he hosts my NAS in exchange for some storage space for him, and I have another copy off-site. And the shares from the main NAS are visible on my workstation as separate drives, video, photo, personal files, but it's just a personal preference. You can have one share and have all the files there just in dedicated folders. I have tried to mount the NAS drives as iSCSI targets, but it was much slower on Windows and quite cumbersome, so I stayed with the Samba-based shares. And this solution works great for me. I can access my files from anywhere in my house via Wi-Fi, and on my main workstation I have the fastest connection via dedicated 10 gigabits link. Yet I can still edit some lighter videos via Wi-Fi on my MacBook Air. If you want to know more details, ask me in the comments below. That's it, and cheers, mate!